very nice. It's very nice. I thought it was nice. Oops. Oh. Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay. Good. You're ready? I'm ready too. Do about it. Okay, sir. Shall we begin? Yes. Hi, welcome to the National British Choice Online News. I'm Robin Stienberg, and welcome to the Stienberg Review. This week, we're having a wonderful conference that's going on. It's all about the first Singapore Translators Conference, which is held here in Singapore Arts House. And today we have a special guest with me. He's none other than Mr. Huan. He was the former chief interpreter for the Parliament, and he retired in January 2007, and he was the first Singaporean to be admitted as an active member of International Association of Conference Interpreters in 1989. Throughout his career, he also acted as the official interpreter for the Prime Minister, ministers, and senior leaders of Singapore in various meetings with top Chinese leaders, as well as negotiations with China. Today he's going to share with us life after as an interpreter and also the future. Mr. Lee, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for the invitation. Yes.
It is a real honor to meet you, and being a chief interpreter in the past for the Prime Minister and the ministers in Singapore. What is it like when you first take on the job as an interpreter?
Well, actually, the word chief is being amplified because it is a very small pool. It's just three of us, and each one of us was actually in charge of one language in the Parliament. So I was in charge of the English Chinese, and then I have a colleague who was in charge of the English Malay, and then another colleague was in charge of the English Tamil. So the word chief is actually a misnomer. But the fact remains that I have been called upon on many occasions to interpret for our ministers and for top leaders. And this actually came rather unexpectedly because it was by chance that I started on a career as an interpreter. That was in March 1968.
Wow, it's a long time.
So at that time I was looking for a job, looking for some income, and then there was this opportunity that was open. And they were looking for an interpreter in the courts. And one of the prerequisites or conditions was that you must be competent to speak in at least two Chinese dialects. And in my case, I'm a Hokkien, but from young I've been speaking Cantonese because I was staying in Stienberg, and most of my playmates, the kids around there were all speaking Cantonese. So Hokkien and Cantonese came naturally to me. And I studied at Catholic High School, which was bilingual even before the word bilingual was used in Singapore. So we were more or less trained to speak both in Chinese and English. So naturally, I fit into what they required. So I went for an interview, and immediately they said, "Oh, when can you start work?" So I got a job, and that was my first and last job. It lasted 39 years, all in all.
Wow.
Yes.
For 39 years, what is it like having seen the growth, the changes, the transformation of Singapore?
Well, I started off as a court interpreter, so it's a very different atmosphere. You know, every day, day in and day out, we deal with crimes, we meet with all kinds of people from all walks of life. And in those days, in the early days, 60s, 70s, most people would be dialect speaking. And in fact, in Singapore, at that time, the predominant dialect was Hokkien. So, and in the courts, because of the British legal system that we have inherited, it's a constitutional right for the accused person or the witnesses to speak in the language that they are comfortable with. So they are allowed to choose any dialects or any Chinese, Mandarin, Hokkien, Cantonese, Teochew, Hainanese, or whatever they like. So we have to provide interpreters for all the language, all the dialects.
Does that still happen today?
Yes, it does. But nowadays I can see that most of the Chinese Singaporeans will be able to speak Mandarin. In fact, much more than those who are speaking in dialects, unless they are, older generation.
Now, what was it like for you to take up the position to interpret or be an interpreter for the Prime Minister? Or was it a very daunting and unnerving for the first time?
Of course. The very thought of it frightened me.
What is it like working with him? That was Lee Kuan Yew, is that right?
Yes. In the early days, I've actually worked for all the three Prime Ministers of Singapore, from Lee Kuan Yew to Chok Tong and to Lee Hsien Loong. And generally, they are demanding, but very sensible to our limitations. Sometimes they know we are in difficult times, they will try to help us find out the problems. But of course, we have to do a lot of homework. And so we must be prepared, well prepared for the job.
Now, what kind of challenges did you face as an interpreter, especially for statesmen like Lee Kuan Yew and and even officials from overseas?
First of all, you must be knowledgeable. You must have a good contextual knowledge of the situation, and you have to keep up with the current affairs to know what's happening. Because out of the blue, they may quote a certain incident or a certain state or certain leaders, and you must know what they are talking about. So that is very important. So for me, I have no choice. Every day I have to read the Chinese paper, I have to read the English paper, and now we have to keep up with internet and all that. If you want to literally stay on your toes.
Now, tell us, having worked with three prime ministers already, and who do you think you have found the most probably the hardest person to work with?
Well, actually, they have their own styles and their own preferences. Take Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, for example. He has a very good knowledge of the Chinese language. He has a very rich vocabulary, and he knows exactly which term to be used for which word. Like, for example, in one incident, we met Premier Li Peng during his visit to Singapore.
That's right, the Chinese Premier.
Yes, that's right. And then there was one part when that then Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew said, well, you have to give them a dose of their own medicine to deal with them. So with that, we have a standard Chinese translation. 以其人之道还治其人之身. I was so happy, so I quickly say, 以其人之道还治其人之身来对付他. And then he turned over to me and said, no, not 对付, it's 应付. Of course, he's right. Prime Minister is always right. But the thing is, we do not, at that moment, that split second, you cannot actually know what he wanted, whether it's a more moderate term, 应付, or a more aggressive term of 对付, or more, arrogant. So it is that kind, it's that minute details. So you have to actually be very careful in interpreting.
Now, you have met Deng Xiaoping, I suppose.
Yes, that was way back in 1979.
Yes, his first visit to Singapore and the last, I think.
Actually, I met him when we were in China in 1979
Oh, I see. Okay.
with Mr. Huan the then Finance Minister. So we were there to negotiate for a trade agreement between China and Singapore. That was the first formal bilateral agreement.
Now, what is it like to meet Mr. Deng Xiaoping at that time?
Oh, in fact, in the early days, the biggest problem with speaking or interpreting for Chinese leaders was that they all had very strong accent.
Yeah, that's right.
And Deng Xiaoping, he was from Sichuan, so he spoke a very Sichuan type of Mandarin. So when I was there interpreting for him, after about 10 minutes or so, he turned around and asked me, 你是中国人还是新加坡人 So I said, 我是新加坡人。新加坡人怎么在中国话你怎么听懂啦 So he was actually speaking in a very heavily accented Sichuan accent Mandarin. But I was fortunate because I had a teacher in Catholic High, a Catholic brother who was from Sichuan. So I was, exposed to that kind of accent for about 2 years. And in fact, when we met many other leaders, they all speak with very heavy accent.
Do you think Deng Xiaoping, in your own perspective, is he a very forward-looking person
Yes,
at that time?
He was very sharp and he could anticipate your issues, your questions. And
Was he very futuristic as well?
yes,
Was he a man of vision, as many said?
I would say so. Yes, and then he had actually know what you have in your mind.
Really?
Yes, because at that time we were talking about the size of the trade office. And before we could, he was talking about how many people they want here, and before we could even raise any sort of objection or anything, he said, well, I know what you think, but it is necessary, because for us, we need to bring in our own chefs, our own people who know how to cook the type of food that we want and all that. So that is necessary. We can actually read our mind.
Well, now, what's the most memorable moment as a translator throughout your last 39 years?
Every moment is memorable, and every task is a challenge.
And what's the most challenging, the hardest that you ever done?
The hardest one was when I was doing the Prime Minister's National Day rally.
Really? I thought that was easy.
No, you see, the National Day rally is telecast live on TV, and most of the time we do not have the script beforehand.
Oh, you don't?
What we were given is usually then very often Prime Minister would deviate from that, depending on the mood, at the hall. There was one occasion when I think that time was Prime Minister Dong. He suddenly came up with these terms, quitters and stayers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I had to very quickly, think of a term to translate that two expressions. And of course, when it came out, there were a lot of objections. People were not happy with the way I put it, but it was a challenge.
What is the most fulfilling aspect of your life? After you're done the translation, was it because you felt that it was satisfaction, or was it because it is your destiny?
Well, actually, the satisfaction comes when you make two people understand each other who would not be able to do so without your help. So in that way, you became the bridge. And when you see that the traffic is now passing through both ways and they both were happy, that is already the satisfaction.
What would be 3 key advice for young people for tomorrow, and even future aspirations of those who want to pursue a career as a translator?
Well, as you know, as a translator or interpreter, the basic requirement is to be proficient, competent in both languages. But just knowing the language is not enough. You need to know the culture. So first you have to pay very close attention to the cultural aspect of the language. And so that you do not make mistakes. Or, there are certain words which are taboo, in one language, while it is not in another. So you have to be very careful with this. And secondly, you have to keep a very close watch on current affairs. Read the newspapers, listen to the news, and sometimes, when you see this interview on the roadside, asking